Look, it's 3 a.m. The neon sign of that diner across the street is flickering like a dying pulse. And I'm sitting here thinking about how we've turned the pursuit of happiness into a collective chemical coma. You see them everywhere. In the bars in Brooklyn, or the quiet, desperate lounges in the suburbs. People clutching glasses of scotch or overpriced IPAs like they're holding onto a life raft in a storm of their own making. They call you strange because you're standing there with a clear head, but honestly, it's terrifying to them. Jung would have looked at this sea of glazed eyes and seen exactly what it is. A mass flight from the shadow. We're a culture that's terrified of silence because, in the silence, the things we've buried start to scream. We drink to drown out the gods, or maybe just to drown out the fact that we've forgotten how to be human without a filter. When you're sober in a room full of sleepwalkers, you're the only one actually feeling the weight of the air, the jagged edges of the conversation, and the raw, unedited reality of being alive in a country that's obsessed with numbing the pain of its own emptiness. It's not that they're having a better time, it's that they're literally not there. They've checked out. They've handed the keys of their consciousness over to a bottle just so they don't have to face the dragon sitting in the corner of the room. Being the only one awake isn't a social faux pas. It's a revolutionary act of courage in a society that treats consciousness like a disease you need to medicate away. It's not some grand poetic choice, it's a fight. You aren't the outlier. You're just the guy standing there watching a slow-motion wreck while everyone else is too blurred to even see the road. It's like everyone is dancing to a beat that died an hour ago, and you're the only one stuck with the silence. It's awkward as hell, but it's real. The thing about being the only sober person at a house party in the hills or a dive bar in Chicago is that you start to see the collective unconscious acting out in real time. And it isn't pretty. It's like watching a stage play where everyone has forgotten their lines, so they just keep repeating the same desperate gestures over and over again. Jung talked about the persona, that mask we wear to fit into the tribe. But when the alcohol starts flowing, the mask doesn't actually drop. It just melts into something grotesque. You see these people, these sleepwalkers, trying so hard to connect, but they're not even talking to each other. They're just projecting their own unhealed garbage onto whoever is standing in front of them. It's a room full of ghosts. And there you are, standing by the wall, nursing a sparkling water, watching the gears of the machine grind away. When they ask why you're not drinking, man, they don't give a damn about your reasons or your health. They're just pissed that your clear eyes are acting like a spotlight on their own messy, drunken bullshit. It's an insult to them. You standing there is basically you holding up a mirror they didn't ask for. It's not about you being boring. It's about them being terrified of what they'll see if they stop pouring shots. In America, we've been sold this lie that fitting in is the same thing as belonging. But you can't belong to a group if you don't even belong to yourself first. They want you down in the trenches of the blur with them because it validates their escape. Choosing to stay awake, to stay sharp, to actually inhabit your own skin without an anesthetic. That's the ultimate shadow work. You're forced to feel the boredom, the social anxiety, and the raw humanity of the moment. It's exhausting, sure, but at least when you wake up tomorrow, your soul will still be in one piece, while they'll be out there trying to find the fragments of theirs in the bottom of a trash can. I was walking through a grocery store in a strip mall the other day, just looking at the faces under those soul-sucking fluorescent lights. And it hit me how much of our normal life is just a different flavor of intoxication. Jung once said that the world hangs by a thin thread, and that thread is the human psyche. But what happens when the thread is frayed by 1,000 little escapes? People think the sleepwalkers are just the ones at the bar, but it's bigger than that. It's the guy scrolling through his phone at a red light in traffic, the woman lost in a prescription haze just to get through a shift at the office, the whole suburban architecture of avoiding the self. When you decide to be sober, you're not just quitting a substance. You're quitting the American religion of distraction. We are a nation of addicts, not just to spirits, but to anything that keeps us from feeling the immense, terrifying weight of our own potential. Sinceramente, It's a heavy burden to carry when you're the only one in the room who isn't buffered by a chemical layer. You start to notice the cracks in the walls that everyone else ignores. You see the sadness in a stranger's eyes that they're trying to drown with a double shot. It's visceral. It's like being the only person in a theater who realizes the building is on fire while everyone else is mesmerized by the movie. They call you judgmental or boring because your clarity is a direct threat to their comfortable numbness. But Jung would tell you that this discomfort you feel is actually the birth of the individual. You're finally separating yourself from the participation mystique, that primitive hive mind state where everyone just bleeds into everyone else. It's lonely, yeah, but that's the price of admission for having a soul that actually belongs to you. You're standing on the edge of the abyss, and instead of closing your eyes and jumping in like the rest of them, you're standing there with your eyes wide open, mapping the terrain. It takes a hell of a lot of spine to look at the void and not try to liven it up with a drink. Think about the way the air feels in a hospital waiting room or a crowded subway car at rush hour. That thick, stagnant tension of people trying to be anywhere else but in their own bodies. That's the great American sleep. We've built an entire civilization around the idea that being present is a chore we should be compensated for, or at least medicated through. Jung had this idea of the wounded healer, but today, we just have the wounded numb. When you're the sober one, you're basically a glitch in the matrix. You're the one who hears the hum of the refrigerator that everyone else has tuned out. It's funny, in a dark way, how we treat sobriety like a restrictive diet or a punishment, when in reality, it's the only way to actually taste the food. I see it in the way people drive on the 405, or the way they stare at their reflections in glass doors. There's a total lack of aha moments because nobody is home to experience them. They are living in the they, that collective soup where nobody is responsible for their own shadow because nobody is conscious enough to own it. Being awake in this room of sleepwalkers means you have to witness the tragedy of wasted life in high definition. You see the father who's checked out while his kid is trying to show him a drawing. You see the couple at dinner staring at their screens instead of each other's souls. It's heartbreaking. And the worst part, if you try to shake them awake, they'll resent you for it. They'll call you intense or too much. But honestly, is there any such thing as too much reality when we're all hurtling toward the same inevitable end? Jung would probably say that the sleepwalkers aren't just avoiding pain. They're avoiding the very spark of life that makes the pain worth it. You're sitting there, raw and exposed, but at least you're participating in your own life. You're not a ghost in your own story. You're the only one in the room who's actually breathing the air, even if it tastes like smog and disappointment. There's a specific kind of coldness that hits you when you're standing in a kitchen at a party, watching the ice melt in everyone's cups, while the conversation devolves into a slurry of ego and repetition. It's the smell of stale beer and that weird, desperate electricity of people trying to outrun their own ghosts. You start to see the archetypes coming out to play, but they're distorted, like a reflection in a broken mirror. There's the jester who's actually crying inside, the hero who's just a bully with a drink in his hand. Jung would have called this a psychic epidemic. We think we're being social, but we're really just participating in a mass ritual of self-sacrifice. We sacrifice our awareness to the god of fitting in. When you're the only one awake, you realize that most people's personalities are just a collection of defense mechanisms stacked on top of each other. It's like being in a room full of people wearing heavy iron suits of armor, clanking against each other, wondering why they can't feel a human touch. Your sobriety is like standing there in just your skin. It's vulnerable and, yeah, it's dangerous, but it's the only way to actually feel the temperature of the world. If the sleepwalkers ever actually woke up and saw the state of things, the whole system would just snap. They need the noise to keep the silence from screaming the truth. And the truth is just that they're lonely and tired. But here, you have to be a winner. And if you aren't, you better be drunk enough to ignore it. You being awake? It's a silent middle finger to that whole rotten setup. That's it. No more, no less. It's the only way to keep your heart from turning into a stone. It's a strange thing, standing in the middle of a crowded sidewalk in a city like Seattle or San Francisco, watching the rain slick the pavement while everyone around you is rushing toward their next fix. Whether it's a craft cocktail, a hit of dopamine from a screen, or a pill to level out the jagged edges of the day. You realize that sobriety isn't just about what you don't drink. It's a state of being integrated, as Jung might put it. Most people are dissociated. They are literally split off from their own bodies. You can see it in their posture, the way their shoulders are up to their ears, their eyes fixed on some invisible point in the future. They aren't in the present because the present is too loud, too heavy, or too empty. When you're the one who is awake, you're forced to carry the weight of the now. It's like being a lighthouse in a harbor full of ships that have lost their rudders. You're not doing it to be a martyr or to feel superior. Honestly, most days you just feel exhausted by the sheer intensity of the colors and the sounds. But there's a certain dignity in it. You start to reclaim your projections. While everyone else is blaming the government, their ex, or the weather for their misery, usually while slurring their words, you're forced to look inward. You realize that the demon isn't in the bottle or the culture. It's the part of you that wants to disappear. And by staying awake, you're refusing to disappear. You're saying, I will be here for my own life, even the parts that suck. That's a terrifying thought to a sleepwalker. To them, your clarity looks like a judgment, because they can't imagine why anyone would choose to feel the raw friction of existence. But that friction, that's where the fire is. That's where the soul is forged. If you don't feel the burn, you're just a piece of cold ash blowing in the wind of the collective. Sinceramente, I'd rather be burned by the truth than frozen in a lie. Ever wonder why the happy hour in those corporate hubs like Midtown Manhattan or downtown LA feels so incredibly somber? It's because it's the hour where everyone collectively decides to pull the plug on their own consciousness. You stand there, leaning against a cold brick wall, smelling the city's mix of exhaust and expensive cologne, and you realize that normality is just a well-manicured hallucination. Jung talked about the persona becoming a prison, and here it is. People performing the role of relaxed, while their eyes are darting around like trapped animals. Being sober in that environment is like having a superpower you never asked for. You can see the strings. You see the subtle flinch when a topic gets too real, the way people use laughter as a shield to keep anyone from getting too close to the shadow. They're sleepwalking through their own relationships, their own careers, their own grief. And because you're awake, you become the unintended confessor. People will lean into your space, their breath smelling of gin and regret, and they'll start telling you things they won't remember tomorrow. They sense your center. They sense that you're actually anchored to the ground while they're floating away in a haze of fermented grain. It's a heavy thing to realize that most of the connection in our society is just a shared delusion fueled by chemicals. If you take away the booze, half of these friendships would evaporate like mist under a summer sun. It's brutal to admit, but your sobriety acts as a filter. It burns away the fluff and leaves you with the bare, jagged bones of reality. It's not strange to want to see clearly. It's strange that we've spent billions of dollars building a world where seeing clearly is considered a social handicap. We're terrified of the unconscious rising up, so we keep the lights low and the glasses full, hoping the monsters don't notice we're home. But you've got the porch light on and the door locked. You're ready for whatever comes out of the woods. You ever notice the way people talk in those dimly lit lounges in Austin or the rooftop bars in Miami? It's all noise. Just a rhythmic humming to keep the silence at bay. When you're the sober one, you realize that nobody is actually listening. They're just waiting for their turn to project. Jung had this concept of enantiodromia, the idea that everything eventually turns into its opposite. We've chased freedom and relaxation so hard that we've ended up in a mental cage. It's pathetic, honestly. Standing there awake, you see the tragedy of the poor eternus, the eternal child, in 40-year-old men who can't handle a Tuesday night without a buffer to keep them from thinking. They're terrified of their own heads. Growth requires the sting of reality, the sharp edge of a regret, The heavy heat of a shame that you actually have to sit with and transform. By staying awake, you're doing the heavy lifting they're all dodging. You're actually feeling your own life. It's like being in a room with a gas leak and being the only one who refuses to stop breathing the cold air from the window. They'll hate you for it. Fine, let them. They'll look at you and see a killjoy. But what you really are is a lifesaver, even if the only life you're saving is your own. You're keeping the self intact in a world that wants to dilute you into a manageable, predictable substance. Sinceramente, it's a lonely throne to sit on, watching the empire of the ego crumble in a pile of empty cans and forgotten promises. But at least your hands are steady. You aren't just not drinking. You are refusing to let the flame of your individual consciousness be snuffed out by the cold wind of the collective. Look, there's a specific kind of silence that hits you around 2 a.m. when you're driving home through a sleeping city, past the darkened storefronts and the flickering streetlights of a place like Denver or Philly. It's a clean silence, but it's heavy, because you're the only one carrying the memories of the night in high definition. Jung talked about the process of individuation, which is basically the long, painful journey of becoming who you actually are. And let me tell you, that path is paved with the no you say to the collective haze. The sleepwalkers think they're exploring the depths when they get wasted, but they're just splashing in the shallows of a manufactured ego. Real depth, the kind that actually changes the shape of your soul, only happens when you're conscious enough to feel the floor beneath your feet. It's visceral to realize that while everyone else is waking up tomorrow with a moral hangover, that deep, gut-wrenching shame of having been someone else for a few hours, you're waking up with your integrity on the nightstand right where you left it. You start to see that the strange label they give you is actually a defense mechanism for their own inadequacy. They can't handle the fact that you can endure the void without a crutch. We live in a society that is literally addicted to avoiding the middle way. It's either extreme overstimulation or total numbness. Being the one who is awake means you're occupying that narrow, difficult space in the center. You're feeling the grit of the sidewalk, the smell of the oncoming rain, and the slow, steady beat of your own heart without any interference. It's like being the only person with a map in a forest where everyone else decided to burn their maps just to stay warm for 5 minutes. You're the witness. You're the one who remembers what was said, what was felt, and what was lost. In a world that's obsessed with ghosting reality, being a witness is the most radical thing you can do. So here we are at the end of the night, standing on the curb while the rest of the world stumbles toward a restless sleep. You look at the sky over a city like Boston or the sprawling lights of Phoenix, and you realize that being awake isn't a destination. It's a constant, shivering choice. Jung once said that there is no coming to consciousness without pain. And God, he wasn't kidding. The sleepwalkers are comfortable in their fog because they've traded their fire for a lukewarm safety. They don't have to face the terrifying vastness of the universe because they've muffled the world in a thick layer of static. But you've chosen the hard path. You've chosen to let the world touch you, to let it bruise you. It's a visceral, raw way to live, but it's the only way that counts. Forget that talk about alchemy or turning lead into gold. That's too fancy for this. It's simpler and uglier. You're just a person refusing to go numb. You're choosing to feel the sting of being alive because at least the sting is proof you're still here. The rest of them? They're ghosts. They're checked out. They are living in a dream that's slowly turning into a nightmare, while you are the one standing in the morning light, ready to face the dawn. Stay awake. Keep your eyes open. And don't let them drag you back into the fog. The world is a mess. It's tragic. It's beautiful. And you're actually there to see it. That's the only prize you get. And it's enough.